Hello, everybody. I'm planning to put AS3 101 series video. As a part of this series, we can start with first video, which will talk a little bit about AS3 and what it is. AS3 is Application Services Extension 3, which is also called as AS3, is a part of F5 Big IP automation toolchain. It uses declarative APIs to configure application objects like your big IP, virtual server, pool members, nodes, profiles, as well as things like iRules and so on. So, little bit history on AS3. So, we started with IAPS. Most of you guys must be familiar of that. It's actually a package application object. So, it packages all the application objects for big IP. For example, applications like Microsoft Exchange, SharePoint, HTTP, DNS, all these objects you can pack it, which are required for your application in a single package, and you can deploy, right? So that way, if you want to delete it or redeploy it, becomes easy and it can be managed pretty easily, because once you delete, all those dependent objects are also taken away, right? So that was easy. Later on, we basically IAPS 2 came, which was like more improvements, fixes. They also made it, easy for automation and so on. But all that is now, IAPS are pretty much, we don't use them. Those are, there is no more new development on that. AS3, which is the application services, that it's more focused, right? So AS3, the good thing is actually it's independent of your big IP release image process. It's an agile method of, building packages, and that's pretty easy. And other thing is actually it's a JavaScript iControl LX plugin, so the development happens independent of big IP development, right? So that allows configuration to be done using JSON based declaration. Let's see, like, how does the AS3 or application services helps, right? So application services 3 extension, AS3, provides a single and simple and consistent way for our customers to automate layer 4 to layer 7 services deployment via declarative APIs, declarative REST APIs, right? So additionally, AS3 provides a sustainable foundation to enable F5's infrastructure as a code strategy, and also makes it easy for future integration with third-party orchestration devices, as well as SDN and NFV solutions. So AS3 basically simplifies and eliminates errors in F5 application service deployment, as well as enables reusable JSON document-based configuration. It's a JSON-based documentation-based configuration. So basically, it will enable the reusable JSON objects by different teams, like different personas. It could be your NetOps or DevOps or app team as well, right? And it follows most of the new declarative APIs and modern agile environments. So delivering APIs is important for big IP adoption across different teams, and becomes easy for them. AS3 JSON schema, it has different classes. So the first class is the AS3 class, under which all other classes are taken care of. The AS3 class will have some parameters, like, for example, it will have, whether I should deploy it or do a dry run kind of parameters will be defined on the AS3. We'll see more details on the class, the JSON schema later. I have a slide which talks about that as well. And then we have the ADC class, which talks about like things like your schema version, what schema version you are using, uh, then the ID for that label, then what type of deployment you are doing, whether it is complete deployment or a new deployment of AS3 and so on. And then you have the tenant class, which is tenant class is actually again inclusion of a particular tenant or a partition, right? Which will have a partition name, and then it can have a route domain. So if you want to put it on route domain 0 or 1 or whatever, those definition, pretty much you can do that. So the tenant class will have a partition name, and it will have all the information about the objects. So typically, how does it help is, let's say if you delete a particular tenant, it will take care of deleting all the applications under those tenant, right? Let's say you have 100 applications running on that tenant. Once you are done, actually, if you want to clean all of them, you can just delete that tenant and it can go away. So that way, all the dependency which are associated with that will also go away. That is the idea. Then you have the application class, which is the definition where what type of application you want to deploy, right? It could be TCP, it could be HTTP, HTTPS, it could be UDP, L4, all those kind of stuff you can define there. So this will be under partition, right? And you can have different classes under that partition itself. Then finally, you will have the service class where the actual virtual servers will be defined. Things like your what type of HTTP, like for example, HTTP or HTTPS virtual server and so on. And then for that, correspondingly for that virtual server, we'll have pool. You can have iRules and HTTP profile class and so on, right? And those objects will come under that particular schema. So let's look at what else you can do with AS3. So AS3, like a typical API, you can do the CRUD operations as well, right? You can delete, create, or update, all that kind of stuff you can do. You can delete a complete partition or a tenant. You can patch, like let's say, for example, you want to modify some of the stuff. You can use patch to that. That is supported in AS3 methods. You can also do retrieve information. Like for example, let's say you have 100 AS3 application deployed. You can basically look at or get information on that using the AS3 path. So it's a standard API interface where you can get all those kind of information. And then finally, you can post, right? You can patch or deploy, or you can also do a dry run. So if you look at how the AS3 schema JSON document looks like, it has like the class, you can see like and the class, let's say ADC class, it will have schema version, label, and then you have the sample 01 is the application. Let's look at more detail here. See, for example, you will have AS3 class here. The class definition, you can have in the class definition, you can have what actions you want to do, right? Whether you want to deploy, you want to just do a dry run or retrieve some things, those definition. Under that, all other things are encapsulated. Like for example, ADC class is encapsulated under that. So here you will have the schema version, ID, label, update mode, whether you want to, deploy a new application or you want to just add to the existing application. Like for example, if you do complete, then it will remove the whole tenant. And if you do selective, then it will basically add to that existing tenant and so on. Then you have the tenant class, which correspond to the partition. So you will have to define the name of the tenant. You give the route domain, that kind of information you can define. And after that, you will have things like your application class. So this is where you will say, okay, what type of application, what type of template I will be deploying, right? It could be HTTP, it could be TCP or UDP, depending upon that. And then then finally you can have the virtual server definition. So again, the service class will define that. So in that service class, it could be service class of type HTTP, it could be HTTPS, UDP, or L4, shared, all that kind of stuff. And then that will contain the virtual server address, right? And pool details. So you can see that. And those two things, like application class, whatever you are defining in the application class, whatever you are saying in the service class has to match, right? It cannot be you're defining HTTP there in the application class, you cannot have in the service class something else. So it has to match. So that way the application will be deployed properly, or the JSON will be in proper shape, or it will be validated JSON. Then you have the pool class, which will correspond to that particular application class or to that virtual server, right? And this will be your standard things like port number as well as node addresses. So the server addresses that's where you will define the node addresses, and service port is where you will define the source under the members. So this is simple details on what is AS3, a little bit about AS3, and you can obtain the software from this link over here. Future videos I will start putting on how do you basically post a AS3 on big IP using VS Code and so on. We can have different methods of doing that. So we'll talk about that. Thank you for watching the video. Stay tuned. Thanks. Bye.